Chapter 25. Summer. There were no longer bows in Janina's hair or socks on her feet. The straps on her shoes were broken and flapped when she walked. The shoes had become muddy scraps. For a while, I tried to shine them with spit, but the mud was too much. The best reflection I had ever seen of myself disappeared with the shine of her shoes. Janina cried a lot, and kicked, and screamed. Sometimes she screamed at her mother, "Mama, Mama, make me a pickled egg! Make me! She loved pickled eggs more than anything, she said, but her mother only lay with her back to the room on the mattress in the corner. As much as Janina cried, she laughed also. But she didn't just laugh. She howled. Especially when I told her that Himmler looked like Uncle Shepsel. We were sitting on the floor, picking each other's lice at the time, and Uncle Shepsel had just said, "You look like monkeys." And I had whispered to Janina, "Himmler looks like Uncle Shepsel." And Janina burst out laughing so hard, she fell backwards and knocked her head on the floor, and lice flew from her hair. And the head knock really hurt, and Janina didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. One day, Janina ran to me in the courtyard. "I found the cow!" she screamed, and grabbed my hand, and we ran. She led me to a bombed-out ice cream shop. 2 walls were still standing. One of them hung a tilting picture of a cow. She often played such tricks on me. Once she tricked me into lending her my Yellowstone necklace. She wore it for days. When I asked for it back, she threw it over the wall. I couldn't believe it. I was so mad I threw the bag of gifts she had left on the steps for me over the wall. She threw my cap over the wall. She had brought one toy animal with her from the other side, a blue and gold stuffed pig. She hid it, and I found it, and then threw it over the wall. She said no more. She said even though I threw away her things, she was going to give me something new. I believed her. I felt bad. She said the new gift was already under my coat bed. I looked. It was a rat bone. She liked to goad me into chasing her. Whether I did or not, she always ran. If I didn't chase her, she would stop and thumb her nose at me and call me, "Mishy, Mishy." I didn't have to be goaded the time she leaned out the window above me and dropped a raw turnip on my head. I picked the turnip out of the dirt, put it in my pocket, and took off after her. When I caught her, I shook her and told her never treat food that way. All she did was laugh. So I rubbed the dirty turnip in her face and shook her harder. And the harder I shook, the louder she laughed. I became so used to her noise, chattering, whining, pestering, laughing, crying, that my ear went on hearing it even when it stopped. All during one particular day, I sensed that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I didn't know that it was the absence of Janina. I barely heard her all day, barely saw her. That night, as usual, most activity came to a stop. The light bulb was always dark now. The end of the day's light was the end of ours. No more knocks on the door for Mr. Milgram's pills and potions. Uncle Shepsel put away his book on how to become a Lutheran. Mrs. Milgram did not have to stop whatever she was doing, for she did nothing to begin with. All day, all night, she lay on the mattress with her back to us. She moved only when she coughed. Usually Janina continued to play pick-up sticks in the dark, by fingertip fill, until her father said, "Janina," and she would stop and lie down on the overcoat next to me. But on this night, she was already on her coat when I lay down. I slept with my new family almost every night now. Mr. Milgram always said goodnight to us, first to Janina, then to me. I always looked forward to that moment, as no one had ever said goodnight to me before. On this night, when he said, "Goodnight, Janina," there was no answer. As usual, I waited until I heard everyone sleeping. It pleased me to do this. I liked to pretend that if anyone heard me go out, it would be forbidden. I got up and crept from the room. I did this nearly every night. I tiptoed down the stairs and into the moonlit courtyard and into the street. My instinct was to be bold and uncatchable, but I enjoyed being sneaky too. The streets looked deserted, but I knew they were not as deserted as they appeared. I knew that somewhere along the wall, Big Henrik stood as tall as he could with Kuba on his shoulders, and Kuba was draping 2 thick coats across the barbed wire and hauling himself over and down to the other side, then tossing over the wall the rope that Big Henrik would winch him back with. I knew that beneath my feet, in the sewers where daylight never fell on the rats and the rivers of poop, Enos and Ferdy and one-armed Oleg were creeping towards the wall, puffing on Fergie's cigars to give themselves points of light and to smoke over the stink. I knew they all wished they could come with me. They wished they could fit through the 2-brick space. As for Yuri, who knew? He was somewhere doing something. I darted from shadow to shadow until I was across the street from the wall. I stood in the shadow of a doorway. The night glowed beyond the barbed wire. Sounds floated over, a clink, a tinkle, a voice, a wisp of music. I leaned out to watch for flops on patrol. Someone was standing in the moonlight, arm's length away. I couldn't believe it. Janina? I followed you. I yanked her into the doorway. Go back, I said. No. Go back. I'm going with you. Her eyes were 2 drops of moonlight. You're not little enough, I said stupidly. I'm littler than you. I'm not taking you. You have to. You're my big brother. That stopped me for a moment. It gave me all the more reason not to allow her. No! Yes! I smacked her in the face. The moondrops wobbled. She smacked me back, and that was that. I dashed across the street to the wall, and in a moment, I was through the 2-brick space and onto the other side. A moment later, she came squirting through the hole. Chapter 26. She stood gaping. The rest of the city! It's still here! I ran to her. I pulled the armband from her sleeve and stuffed it into her coat pocket. I did the same with my own. See, you made me forget! I stomped off. It was no good to be seen near the wall. I took the sidewalks. I heard her footsteps behind me, and I walked fast. Maybe I couldn't stop her from following me, but I had no intention of making her a full partner. Soon we were among the people, the source of the voices and sounds that came drifting over the wall. In the ghetto, all was gray. The people were gray, the sounds were gray, the smells were gray. Here, everything was colors to me. The red clang of the streetcars, blue music of phonographs, silver laughter of people. In the distance, the toodles of the merry-go-round were a swirl of colors. Whenever I came back through the wall, I wanted to do nothing but walk the streets. I remembered Yuri's words, "Don't look guilty." I swaggered down the sidewalk. I headed straight for other pedestrians and made them veer around me. I whistled. In other words, I ignored Yuri's other commands. Don't call attention to yourself. Be invisible. Or maybe I heeded a little. I resisted the temptation to put the blue and white band back on my arm. I was proud to be part of the Milgram family. Proud to be a Jew. I wanted to wave my armband and shout, "Hey everybody, look at me, I'm a Jew, a filthy son of Abraham." But I didn't. I heard Janina whistling behind me. I went to my favorite place. It was a hotel for jackboots. Jackboots ate there and drank beer and slept there. A blue neon sign in the shape of a camel blinked on and off above a revolving door. I did what I always did. I went in the revolving door and around and right back outside again. Janina did it too, but she didn't stop after once around. I jerked her away. I went around back. Garbage cans as tall as me were lined up like soldiers. As usual, the lids were off, and several children were poking through the stench and maggots. They were too busy to notice me. The hatch door leading to the food cellar was locked, as usual. There were several windows at ground level. There were steel bars in front of the glass. I knelt before one of the windows. I pushed it open. I took off my coat and tossed it inside. I turned myself sideways and squeezed between the two bars and dropped headfirst into the dimly lit cellar. I thought nothing of it. I lived in the cracks of a world made for large, slow people. As I was bending over for my coat, Janina's coat hit me in the rump. She came tumbling down in a flurry of underwear. "Ow!" she squawked. "Be quiet," I told her. "You should have stayed home." I pulled the sack from my pocket and unfolded it. "What's that for?" she said. "Food," I said. "I don't have one." "Too bad." "Where's the pickled eggs?" "They don't have any." Not that I would have known a pickled egg if I saw one. She swept a large coffee can from the shelf. It crashed to the floor. I balled my fist in front of her face. "Stop it! They're gonna hear!" She jabbed her chin at me. "I don't like you." "I don't like you." "Good," she said. She stomped off among the shelves, searching for pickled eggs. I began making my rounds. There was one problem with the Blue Camel Hotel food cellar. Much of the food was in cans and jars too big and heavy to carry a long way, so I concentrated on smaller, lighter things. There were wooden bins of onions and lettuces and turnips and cabbages. There were boxes of soda crackers and stacked loaves of brown and black bread. There were gray, ancient dried fish and jellies and potatoes sprouting wigs of grass. I avoided the cold locker of fresh meats, as we had no way to cook them, but shriveled clubs of sausage were perfect. I filled my sack and headed for my treat. Although the jars of fruits and vegetables were too big to carry, who was to say I could not help myself to them right there in the food cellar? I pulled out from the dusty corner my personal jar of peaches and syrup. The jar was almost as big as round as myself. I unscrewed the lid and grabbed a peach. "What's that?" came Janina's voice at my shoulder. "What's it look like?" I stuffed the peach in my mouth. "I want one." She reached. I smacked her hand. "They're mine." She balled her fist, leaned back, and screamed, "I'm hungry!" I grabbed another peach and stuffed it into her mouth. "Here!" I quick closed the jar and shoved it back just as the door opened and the light flooded from above. Footsteps came partway down the stairway and stopped. A voice said, "Hello? Hello?" We crouched by the fruit jars, our cheeks bulging, peach juice streaming from our chins. "Hello?" At last, the footsteps went away and the door closed. I pushed a crate under the window and climbed onto it. I shoved the stuffed sack and then myself through the bars. Even standing on the crate, Janina couldn't reach, so I had to help haul her out. Going back, lugging the sack over my shoulder, we stayed in the shadows and alleyways until the final dash across the moonlight to the 2-brick space and onto the other side. Another dash across the moonlight and back into the shadows. I headed for the orphanage. Dr. Corsack always left a window unlocked in the back. I opened it and dumped in half the contents of my sack. "What are you doing?" said Janina. "Feeding the orphans," I told her. "You're supposed to feed us!" I was tired of her crabbing. "I feed whoever I want to feed." I slammed the window shut and headed home.